Corey stared at his laptop in frustration. Another rejection email blinked on the screen, cheerful and cruel all at once. Thank you for your interest, unfortunately. He didn't bother reading the rest. They all sounded the same after the 20th one. He groaned, slumping back in his chair. I have a degree. I have experience. I even have references, he muttered to the empty room. What do you people want? My soul? The answer, apparently, was his secondary gender. Corey was an omega, a perfectly functional, responsible omega with zero intention of causing workplace drama. But that didn't matter. Every interview took a strange turn the moment the topic came up. Some companies asked invasive questions disguised as policy concerns. One alpha had even suggested he'd be more comfortable in a less demanding role. Opening yet another job application, Corey hesitated at the familiar menu. What's your gender? Alpha, beta, omega. He hovered over omega. Then, slowly, deliberately, he clicked beta. He submitted the application before he could change his mind. 3 days later, his phone rang. Corey nearly dropped the phone when he saw the company name. Marvin Holdings. He'd applied on a whim, assuming he'd never hear back. The company was massive. He cleared his throat and answered. Hello? Corey Hale? A crisp voice asked. Yes, speaking. We'd like to schedule an interview. Corey blinked. I'm sorry, you'd like to what? An interview with Mr. Marvin, the Marvin. Corey hung up minutes later after the briefing, heart racing. He was actually going to the interview pretending to be a beta. The next day, after taking suppressant, he headed to the company. The journey to the company was a blur. He was nervous and worried he was going to be found out. Now, he is waiting at the office for Marvin. Minutes later, the office door opened. Marvin stepped in, tall, broad, alpha in a way that felt expensive. Marvin's eyes flicked to Corey's file, then up to his face. Something unreadable crossed his expression. Beta, Marvin said thoughtfully, as if tasting the word. Corey smiled too fast. Yes, that's me. Marvin held his gaze a second longer than necessary, lips twitching. Interesting, he said. You're hired. That was faster than Corey had expected. Corey walked out 10 minutes later in a daze, contract signed. The next Monday, after drowning himself in scent suppressant sprays and taking pills, Corey arrived at work 20 minutes early. He stood outside Marvin Holdings with a coffee in one hand, psyching himself up. You are a beta, he reminded himself. The security guard scanned his ID and waved him through. Corey walked briskly toward the elevators, like he knew exactly where he was going. He did not. After accidentally stepping into a meeting room full of very confused executives, Corey finally found his desk. It was nice. First day, Corey jumped. A tall beta, an actual beta, stood beside him, smiling. I'm Lena, HR. Oh, hi, yes, first day, I'm Corey. Lena nodded. Right, Mr. Marvin wants to see you at 10. Corey's stomach dropped. At 10 sharp, he stood outside Marvin's office, adjusting his shirt for the 5th time. He stepped in when called. Marvin was already watching him. You're early, Marvin said. I like being prepared, Corey replied, voice steady. He was proud of that. Marvin hummed. Sit. The meeting was normal, too normal. Marvin explained expectations, projects, deadlines. Corey took notes. Then Marvin leaned back slightly. You don't smell like most betas, he said casually. Corey froze. It's probably my new soap, he blurted. Marvin's eyes darkened with amusement. Interesting. By lunchtime, Corey was convinced he was going to be fired. He was convinced Marvin found out he was an omega in just his first day. He sat in the break room, stabbing at his salad aggressively. Across from him, a junior alpha sniffed the air. Is someone baking? Corey choked. What? The air smells kind of sweet, the alpha said, confused. Corey panicked internally. He doubled his suppressants that morning out of nerves. Maybe it was too much? Was that a thing? Could suppressants backfire? He excused himself quickly. ducking into the bathroom to splash cold water on his face. "Get it together," he whispered. "You are fine." When he stepped back into the hallway, he nearly collided with Marvin. "Oh, sorry," Corey squeaked. Marvin steadied him by the elbow automatically. The contact was brief, but Marvin's expression shifted instantly. "You should be careful," Marvin said quietly. "You're flushed." Corey laughed nervously. "The air is weird today, right?" Marvin didn't laugh. "Go home early," Marvin said after a moment. "Get some rest." Corey blinked. "Are you firing me?" "No," Marvin said firmly. "I'm concerned." "Concerned." Corey nodded, grabbed his bag, and practically fled the building. The next morning, he arrived at Marvin Holdings fully armed with 2 bottles of scent-suppressing spray. Being Marvin's secretary was intense. He ran errands, organized meetings, and scheduled calls. Each day, Corey downed his suppressants with increasing desperation, spraying his wrists, neck, hands, and occasionally his hair, as if covering himself in an invisible armor. The week was a blur of phone calls and spreadsheets. Thursday morning, as Corey organized Marvin's calendar, a new email popped into his inbox. Mandatory Beta Alpha Workplace Harmony Seminar. Corey blinked. Harmony Seminar? He clicked. The description made him want to curl into a ball. Interactive workshop for beta and alpha employees. Learn the best practices for managing interactions, scent exposure, and workplace dynamics. He scrolled quickly, heart hammering. A cold realization hit him. He was the only Omega in the entire office, and he was pretending to be a beta. Thursday afternoon was spent in a state of panic, meticulously rehearsing how to blend in. But each inhale of air carried the faint scent of the alphas around him, and Corey's suppressed Omega instincts twitched in protest. Friday morning, the seminar began. Corey squeezed into the crowded room, clutching his notebook as if it were a shield. At first, the exercises seemed harmless. Breathing drills, posture alignment, and group introductions. Corey nodded politely, smiling when expected, but each time an alpha would mistakenly release some pheromones near him, his stomach tightened. He couldn't blame the alpha, as betas don't really react to pheromones, so they probably thought it was okay. The next exercise involved a Q&A about stress responses in alphas and betas. Corey's heart nearly stopped when the facilitator asked, "Most likely react physiologically to an alpha's close scent during high-stress work conditions." Corey's hand shot up automatically before his brain could intervene. Increased pulse, shallow breathing, and sometimes involuntary pheromone release," he said, voice slightly shaky, but correct in every detail. Silence fell over the room. Corey realized immediately what he had done. He had just revealed knowledge only an Omega could have in a room of betas and alphas. And of course, Marvin was there, sitting in the back, arms crossed. He was silent, just watching. By the time the seminar ended, Corey was exhausted and felt embarrassed. He packed up his bag, leaving first. Marvin stayed in the seminar room long after it ended, letting the other employees file out. Corey had left first, flustered and moving like a small animal trying to make itself invisible. And yet Marvin's senses were screaming in ways he wasn't used to. Normally, he could ignore betas in close quarters. He could control himself, but Corey was different. His body was responding in ways he didn't like. He frowned, leaning back in his chair. Betas didn't trigger him like that. Corey had reacted instinctively to the scent exercises, flinching, hesitating, giving away knowledge that only an Omega would know. Marvin's mind ran through the possibilities. Could he really be an Omega? Alpha instinct rarely lied. His brow tightened. If I'm reacting this strongly, other alphas would too. And Corey was just in a room full of dominant males. That was not safe for any Omega. He could get hurt, and Marvin had no intention of letting that happen. He needed information. He needed to test Corey. Marvin exhaled slowly. This is going to be interesting. He would need to be careful, keep it under control, but also see how Corey truly reacted. A plan began to form. He would put Corey in a situation where his suppressed instincts might slip, watch his reactions, and quietly assess just how deep those Omega tendencies ran. The next morning, Corey woke up that morning with a pit in his stomach. He knew Marvin had been suspicious ever since the seminar, The way the alpha had watched him, it was like being under a predator's microscope, and Corey did not want to blow his cover today. He opened his cabinet and looked through his packs of suppressants. 2 extra doses of oral suppressants? Check. Scent spray, spritzed on wrists, neck, and even behind the ears? Check. Hand sanitizer? Check. At the office, Marvin watched from his desk as Corey entered. He subtly released a controlled dose of his own alpha pheromones into the office. Just a faint trace. Nothing happened. He released even more, enough to make even a beta notice under normal circumstances. He leaned back, expecting Corey to flinch, or maybe even step back a little. Nothing happened. Corey sat at his desk, neatly arranging pens, his expression calm. Marvin pinched the bridge of his nose, trying not to laugh. There was no way Corey was a beta. Marvin was smart enough to know that the little Omega had clearly overprepared. Pills, sprays, whatever combination of suppressants Corey had brewed this morning, it had worked. The alpha scent wave that usually made even experienced betas slightly uneasy was shrugged off. Marvin leaned back in his chair, smiling as he now knows the truth. Corey, meanwhile, was oblivious to the experiment entirely, humming quietly as he typed an email. As the afternoon dragged on, Marvin realized he would need a way for Corey to come clean to him by himself. Corey was sitting on his desk when Marvin appeared in the doorway. Tall, imposing, alpha aura practically radiating, he held a printed sheet in one hand. "Corey," Marvin said casually, though every inch of him screamed authority. "You'll be accompanying me on a business trip next week. 2 days. Out of town." Corey froze mid-hand movement. He smiled politely, nodding. 2 days. With him? Oh no. His face betrayed none of the internal screaming. Marvin smirked. "Book a hotel for the days we'll be spending there. Book a standard twin bed. Should be fine." Corey could feel his Omega instincts pinging warnings at his brain. Abort. Abort. Twin bed. Twin bed. "Yes, sir," he said carefully, already calculating how many suppressants, sprays, and mental mantras he would need to survive. Marvin handed him the schedule. "I'd expect you to take notes, organize the meetings, and ensure everything runs smoothly." "Absolutely," Corey said, nodding. Once Marvin left, Corey leaned against the supply cabinet, letting out a long breath. How did it come to this? Corey scribbled a list in his notebook titled, "Business Trip Survival Guide." 1. Extra suppressants. 2. Sprays every 30 minutes. 3. More sprays for emergency use. 4. Avoid eye contact. 5. Remember to pretend to be an actual beta at all times. 6. Pray he doesn't notice Omega-specific reactions from me. "This is going to be fine," he muttered to himself, not even believing it. Next week came too quickly. Corey practically waddled through the airport, luggage in one hand, a spray bottle and pills hidden in his jacket pockets. He had already taken 3 doses of suppressants that morning, and the thought of having to double dose again during the flight made his stomach twist in nausea. Marvin, walking a few steps ahead, observed quietly. The sheer amount of suppressants the tiny Omega was packing made him both amused and mildly concerned. I should probably keep an eye on him, Marvin thought, because he might literally overdose himself trying to appear as a beta. They settled into the plane and sat together. Marvin leaned back, arms crossed casually. Corey immediately reached into his bag, pulling out a small spray bottle. He gave his wrists a careful spritz, then dabbed a bit behind his ears, muttering under his breath. Marvin's sharp eyes tracked every motion. After a moment, he leaned slightly closer, eyebrow raised. "What exactly are you spraying there?" Corey froze, heart hammering. He forced a calm smile and said, "Oh, it's perfume." "Perfume, huh?" Marvin's voice was teasing, carrying that faint edge of amusement that made Corey's stomach do flips. He tilted his head slightly, studying Corey like he was a puzzle. "Smells strong." Corey swallowed, trying to keep his composure. "Please don't smell anything under it. Please don't smell anything under it," he repeated in his mind desperately. Marvin leaned a little closer, just enough for Corey to feel the warmth radiating off him. I've never seen someone go so precise with a scent before. Could he smell my Omega scent? Corey's pulse quickened, and he pressed his hands firmly to his lap, trying to act like a calm, composed adult. "It's, just a favorite perfume," he said, hoping he sounded casual. Marvin tilted his head, still smirking. It's really strong. Strong enough to mask something? He teased lightly, letting the words linger just long enough to make Corey's mind spiral. Oh no, 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 no. Does he know? Can he smell me? Corey cleared his throat and smiled tightly, trying to appear neutral. Mask? No, just perfume, he repeated. Marvin chuckled softly. All right, he said finally, leaning back slightly, but keeping his gaze fixed on Corey. And just like that, 6 hours of flight suddenly felt like an eternity. Few hours later, they finally reached their hotel. The hotel room door clicked shut behind them. The room was spacious with twin beds. Marvin looked completely relaxed. He tossed his suitcase on the far bed and gave a long, exaggerated stretch. Finally, he said, voice low and casual. Some space to get comfortable. Without warning, Marvin unbuttoned his shirt and shrugged it off, tossing it onto a chair. Corey blinked, his brain struggling to keep pace with reality. He tried to remind himself that he's supposed to be a beta, calm, neutral. And yet, the blush rising to his cheeks betrayed every fiber of him. Marvin's eyes flicked up, catching Corey's gaze, and he smirked. You okay there? I'm fine, Corey said quickly, pressing his hands to his lap and trying not to stare. His mind ran through escape strategies that involved hiding under a bed or jumping out the window. Marvin yawned dramatically, then started unbuttoning his pants. Corey's brain short-circuited. Please, leave them on, he squeaked. Marvin paused mid-motion, eyes narrowing playfully. Why? He asked innocently, as if puzzled by the absurd request. For reasons. Corey's blush deepened. Marvin chuckled softly and stepped closer, deliberately slow, hands in his pockets. Corey tried to back up, but there was nowhere to go. The wall was right behind him. Marvin's smirk widened. You're very tense, Marvin murmured, voice low, teasing. I wonder why a beta would react like this. Corey's knees threatened to buckle. He bent slightly, instinctively trying to make himself smaller, eyes darting anywhere but Marvin. Fine, he stammered. Marvin leaned in even closer until Corey felt pressed against the wall. You're fine? Yet here you are, flustered. Corey could barely breathe, cheeks burning. Finally, he managed to mutter, I need bathroom, and he bolted, leaving Marvin standing there, smirking to himself at Corey's adorably flustered retreat. The night passed in a blur of awkward tension. Corey avoided lingering too long near Marvin. He used multiple sprays that night. The next morning, Corey woke up feeling wrong. His head throbbed, his limbs felt heavy, and there was a sick, crawling warmth under his skin that made his stomach twist. He groaned softly, curling in on himself before forcing his eyes open. The room felt too bright. Heat. No, 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 he whispered, panic surging. He rolled out of bed too quickly and nearly collapsed, catching himself on the edge of the desk. His bag sat half open on the chair, his pills peeking out. Relief flooded him when he glanced around the room. Marvin wasn't there. Good, I can fix this. Corey stumbled to the bag, hands shaking as he popped open the container, fingers clumsy, breath coming too fast. Just then, the door clicked open. Corey froze. Marvin stepped inside, carrying a small paper bag. His eyes immediately locked onto Corey, and then dropped to the pill in Corey's trembling hand. Corey, Marvin said sharply. Before Corey could react, Marvin crossed the room in 3 long strides and snatched the pill straight out of his fingers. No, Corey gasped. I need that. Marvin closed his hand around it, jaw tight. His pupils were blown, his alpha instincts clearly reacting to the heat in the room, but he shoved it down. Absolutely not. Corey backed away, shaking his head. I'm a beta. It's just my stomach's upset. Stop, Marvin said, voice firm. I know you're an omega. The words hit harder than any accusation. Corey opened his mouth to deny it again, but nothing came out. His body was betraying him. The heat, the weakness, the way his knees threatened to give out. There was no way Marvin could believe him now. His shoulders sagged. I just wanted a job, Corey whispered, voice breaking. That's all. Every place I applied to, they said they'd call, and then nothing. Or they asked if I planned to manage my condition, like I was a liability. His eyes burned. I'm good at my work, but no one wants an omega. His legs gave out mid-sentence. Marvin caught him instantly, strong arms steadying him before he hit the floor. "Easy," he murmured, guiding Corey back toward the bed. Corey didn't resist, too weak to do anything but cling faintly to Marvin's sleeve. Marvin settled him onto the mattress carefully, sitting him upright before pushing Corey's shoulders back down when he tried to speak again. "Don't," Marvin said quietly. "Don't talk." Corey swallowed hard, tears slipping free despite himself. Marvin exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I talked to a chemist this morning," he continued. "You've been overdosing on suppressants, skipping heats. That's why you're sick." Corey tensed. "The safest treatment," Marvin said, meeting his eyes, "is to let the heat happen. Induce it properly instead of fighting it." Corey's breath hitched. Fear, embarrassment, and relief tangled painfully in his chest. Marvin stayed close, grounding, protective. "You're not in trouble," he added, "and you are not poisoning yourself to survive here. Not on my watch." Marvin stayed close, seated on the edge of the bed. Corey's breathing was uneven, his body still trembling from the heat pressing through him. He looked small like this, exhausted, sick, scared, and it did something unpleasantly sharp to Marvin's chest. "There's something else you should know," Marvin said quietly. Corey blinked up at him, eyes glassy. "If this is about firing me," he whispered, just say it." Marvin frowned. "No." He exhaled and leaned back slightly, giving him space without leaving. "I fully took over as CEO last month, after my father stepped down, and one of the first things I saw when I reviewed company policy was that rule." Corey's chest tightened. "The Omega rule?" Marvin nodded. "No Omegas allowed in executive or close contact positions. My father put it in place years ago. He said it was for stability." His mouth twisted. "I call it archaic and unfair." Corey swallowed, fingers curling into the sheets. "Then why? Why was it still there?" "Because changing a company like this takes time," Marvin said honestly. "But I was already in the process of removing it. I wanted to start hiring Omegas. They are overlooked because of biology instead of skill." Corey let out a shaky breath. "You're lying." Marvin looked him dead in the eye. "If you had selected Omega on your application," he said steadily, "you still would have been hired." The words hit Corey harder than the confession earlier. "What?" "You were qualified," Marvin said simply. "Overqualified, honestly. The lie didn't get you the job. Your work did." Corey's throat closed. "I didn't have a choice," he whispered. "Every interview, I was rejected. I thought if I just hid my gender long enough—" "You shouldn't have had to," Marvin interrupted gently. Silence stretched between them, thick but no longer sharp. Marvin stood and poured a glass of water, handing it to Corey. "You're safe here," he said. "Your job is safe, and once this heat passes, no more overdosing, no more pretending." Corey's hands shook as he took the glass. "You're really okay with this?" Marvin huffed softly. "I didn't become CEO to keep my father's mistakes alive." It was a few hours later, and Marvin could feel it. The heat wasn't just Corey's. It had sunk into the room, thick and clinging, curling around Marvin's instincts. He stood near the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, jaw tight as he breathed through it. Every inhale dragged Corey's scent deeper into him. Control was everything, and right now, it was difficult. Corey lay on the bed, flushed and trembling, fingers twisting in the sheets as he tried to keep still. His eyes followed Marvin without meaning to, every instinct pulling him toward the alpha standing across the room. "I'm sorry," Corey whispered hoarsely. "Don't apologize," Marvin said sharply, then softened his tone. "You didn't do anything wrong." He moved closer despite himself, stopping just short of the bed. The air between them snapped tight. Corey's breath hitched instantly. "You're burning up," Marvin murmured, knuckles brushing Corey's wrist as he checked his pulse. The contact sent a visible shiver through Corey's body. Marvin pulled his hand back immediately. "Easy," he said, voice rougher now. "I've got you." Corey nodded, cheeks flushed darker. "You smell strong," he admitted before he could stop himself. Minutes stretched. Marvin sat in the chair beside the bed, posture rigid, eyes locked anywhere but Corey's face. But he couldn't help but glance at him. He regretted it instantly. Corey's hair was damp with sweat, lashes heavy, lips parted slightly as he breathed. Heat made Omega's open in ways that were devastatingly honest. Marvin stood abruptly. "No," Corey whispered, panic flickering. "Don't leave." Marvin stopped. "I'm not," he said, turning back slowly. "I just need to keep control." Corey's eyes were hooded. "But I don't want you to, Alpha." That did it. Marvin stepped forward and braced his hands on the mattress, caging Corey without touching him. The proximity was overwhelming. Corey's breath stuttered. His body arched instinctively, then froze when he realized what he was doing. Marvin lowered his voice in warning. "Don't say that again." Corey nodded rapidly, cheeks blazing. "You're safe," Marvin said quietly. "But don't confuse my restraint for lack of desire." Corey's eyes widened. Marvin straightened immediately, stepping back like he'd crossed a line. "Rest," he ordered. "Gentler now." Corey curled onto his side. This was the first time he had gone into heat with an alpha close by, and he wasn't afraid. Marvin remained awake all night, watching, guarding, burning. The next morning, Marvin had to go for a meeting. He didn't want to leave Corey alone, but Corey felt bad because he missed the first meeting because of his heat, so he encouraged Marvin to go. Marvin stood by the door, jacket over his arm, glancing repeatedly toward Corey. "I'll be back as soon as possible," he said, tone filled with concern. Corey, curled up on the hotel bed, managed a small smile. "I'll be fine. Really. Go handle your meetings," he said, though the faint tremor in his hands betrayed him. Marvin studied him for a long moment, instincts still on high alert. "Stay cautious and don't open the door for anyone," he murmured, voice low, almost a growl. He hesitated, then left the room, closing the door gently behind him. Corey exhaled sharply, sinking back into the pillows. The heat that had plagued him through the night finally began to fade, leaving him exhausted but relieved. The meeting was a success, and it was the next day. By the time they boarded the flight home, Corey felt human again, though still flushed and weak from the aftermath. Walking to the car, Marvin kept a protective hand lightly on the small of Corey's back. Corey allowed it, leaning into the warmth and stability the Alpha radiated. When they reached Corey's building, the tension in the car had built almost unbearably. Marvin stepped out first, holding the door open for Corey. He followed him up the steps, quiet, deliberate. The air between them was charged. Corey's chest tightened the moment they reached his door. Without thinking, he leaned forward, pressing a quick, impulsive kiss to Marvin's lips, and then pulled back immediately, cheeks burning. "I'm sorry," Corey stammered, voice small. Marvin's lips curved into a slow, teasing smile. He leaned in, blocking the doorway with his body. "Sorry?" he murmured, tone low and dangerous. "Or just nervous, little Omega?" Corey's stomach fluttered. I don't want to mess everything up." Marvin cut him off with a teasing grin, stepping closer until Corey's back was pressed against a wall. "Mess everything up?" he murmured. "I think you underestimate how much I like you, little Omega." Corey froze, eyes wide, heart thudding. Before Corey could respond, Marvin closed the gap. Their lips met again. Longer, slower, teasing, demanding. They pulled back just slightly, foreheads touching, breaths mingling. Marvin laughed nervously. "I've been waiting too long to do that." The next morning, Corey arrived at the office. Suppressants? Not today. He was still nervous, but determined. No more lies. He pushed open the office door, and immediately, dozens of heads turned. Mouths parted, eyes widened, whispers rippled through the room. Corey's heartbeat jumped. He had expected some reaction, but this was cinematic. Every coworker, from interns to managers, was staring, and every glance carried shock and curiosity. He froze for a fraction, then straightened his shoulders, holding his head high. This was him, an Omega, unashamed. Marvin appeared beside him at that exact moment. He gave a tiny nod toward Corey, just enough to assert ownership without words. One of the senior alphas whispered, half to the group, "I thought he was a beta." Another muttered, "He's an Omega." Corey's lips twitched into a nervous, triumphant grin. He wasn't hiding anymore. Corey had barely finished settling into his desk when the office atmosphere shifted. One of the senior alphas, tall, confident, and notoriously charming, had sauntered over. He stopped just a step too close, smile teasing, hands in his pockets. "Well, well," he said smoothly, voice low enough for only Corey to hear. "I didn't know we had an Omega working here. And not just any Omega, you're something else." Corey froze mid-breath, heat from the morning's episode still lingering faintly under his skin. He swallowed, trying to keep composure. Thank you." His voice wavered, betraying him just enough. The alpha leaned in a little closer, scent unmistakably alpha and strong. "So what do you say we go out tonight for a drink?" he murmured. There was a deliberate brush of his hand near Corey's papers, not touching him, but close enough to send Corey's heart hammering. Corey's mind went blank. I'm busy," he stammered, barely managing to push a polite smile. The alpha chuckled, amused by Corey's awkward flinch. "You're adorable when you're flustered." He lingered a moment longer, then leaned in and whispered, "Okay, but what about a little after-work chat?" Corey's chest tightened. He opened his mouth to respond, but Marvin's voice stopped him. "Corey." The alpha straightened instantly, eyes narrowing slightly. Marvin's presence filled the doorway. Corey turned, relief flooding him. Marvin's gaze swept the alpha once, glaring, and then back to Corey. "I believe he told you he's busy," Marvin said, voice low, carrying a dangerous edge. The alpha's confident grin faltered. "Oh, just saying hello." Marvin stepped closer, closer than necessary. Corey's cheeks flamed from the possessive energy that Marvin radiated. "You were saying," Marvin asked, tone playful but with a hint of warning. His eyes never left the alpha, and the tension was palpable. The other alpha swallowed, suddenly aware of the invisible line head crossed. Nothing," he muttered, quickly walking out of the office. Marvin gave him a small, sharp nod and then turned fully to Corey. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice softening, hand brushing lightly against Corey's shoulder. Corey nodded, still flushed but smiling faintly. "Yeah, thanks." Marvin smirked. "Good, because you're mine, Corey. Everyone else can look, but no one touches. Got it?" Corey bit his lip, nodding, trying not to smile too widely. "Got it." It was a month later. Corey walked into the office that morning with a confidence he hadn't felt in years. The difference was palpable. Now there were more Omegas working alongside him. Corey spotted a group laughing together near the lounge. A couple of Omegas were presenting reports. It all made Corey smile. He wasn't alone anymore. He didn't have to shrink or flinch at every alpha in the room. Marvin appeared at the doorway, as always. His alpha energy radiated subtly. "Morning, Corey," Marvin said casually, sliding a cup of coffee onto his desk. Corey chuckled. "Morning, boss." Marvin raised an eyebrow. "Morning, Omega," he teased, smirk tugging at his lips. Corey's cheeks warmed from amusement. Marvin walked inside the office, leaning casually against the edge of Corey's desk. "You've been smiling a lot," he said, tone teasing but with warmth. "Does this mean you're finally enjoying yourself?" "I am," Corey admitted, letting himself relax fully. "It feels nice. Normal. To not be hiding and not be the only Omega." Marvin's grin softened, eyes darkening slightly with that alpha possessiveness Corey had grown used to and secretly adored. "Good, because you're mine, Corey. And now everyone knows it, officially." Corey laughed softly, shaking his head. "I don't mind." Marvin reached out and lightly brushed his fingers along Corey's hand, letting the touch linger. After work, Marvin walked Corey out, like he always did now. "Dinner?" Marvin asked, holding Corey's coat open for him. Corey smiled, slipping his arms into it. "At your place or mine?" Marvin raised a brow. "You're assuming I'm letting you escape tonight." Corey laughed. They drove together, music low, the city lights blurring past. Corey kicked off his shoes the moment they got inside Marvin's apartment, already comfortable, already home. Marvin loosened his tie, watching him with a fond, amused expression. "You know," Marvin said, stepping closer, "lying on your resume was still illegal." Corey gasped dramatically. "You're dating a criminal?" Marvin leaned down and kissed his temple. "Worth the risk." They curled up on the couch later, legs tangled, Corey's head resting against Marvin's shoulder. For the first time, Corey didn't dread tomorrow. He had a legal job. He had Marvin. And he wasn't hiding himself. The end.